Hey, what's going on, guys? Kalamazi here, and earlier today, Blizzard dropped a plethora of information on both patch 10.0.7 and patch 10.1. We now have a release date for patch 10.0.7. It is going to be March 21st, and patch 10.1 is indeed hitting PTR. I guess today, it's 2 in the morning on March 9th. Later on today, it should indeed be live, and with that comes a new raid, new zones, new dragon raiding, Mythic Plus changes, new dungeons, raid changes. And Blizzard dove more into that today in a plethora of posts talking about loot changes, the catalyst, a million things here and there. So today, I guess in this video, I want to give you all my thoughts on some of the larger PvE-based talking points, some good things, some bad things, some things that we'll see if they change, and things I'm excited about, all of that, and everything, few and far between. Now, if you guys like the video, hit the like and sub buttons below. It helps out a ton. And yeah, let's just get honestly right into it. Alrighty, so I guess the best way to get into it is just to look at the updated roadmap Blizzard has for the remainder of the year. I guess realistically the remainder of Dragonflight, assuming they don't get a patch 10.3. Season 2, patch 10.1. New zone, Zaralek Cavern. New raid, Aberrus, I think it's Aberrus, the Shadow Crucible. Fire Rack Assaults, Niffin Renown and Rewards. New PvP season, new M+ Dungeon Pool, obviously, which are 4 new... 4 dungeons from Dragonflight, Brackenhide, Halls of Infusion, Oldemon, and Notharus, and 4 other returning dungeons, which are very cool. New dragon riding, Drake, and user-improved interface stuff, which is cool. They go on to highlight the new zone, which is Zaralek Caverns, which is very, very cool. This zone, to me, is like a mix of... What's this zone called in current game? I always forget what it's called. Like, up here, Obsidian Citadel-esque meets Zangar Marsh, which are like polar opposites. But if you look at what it looks like that. Like, here's like, I would assume the like opening of Zaralek Cavern. You can indeed dragon ride in this cavern. And the cool thing is that they've given screenshots both of the actual like Zaralek Caverns itself and the raid. So I'm assuming this is outside the raid. Once again, Aberrus, one of the two. Really has that Blackwing layer, Blackwing Descent feel, which is what they mentioned in the actual blog. They pulled references, they pulled inspiration from Blackwing Lair, Blackwing Descent. This is sort of a Black Dragonflight themed patch, which is very, very cool. Moving on further here, this to me looks insane. This reminds me so much of like Zangar Marsh meets Nashatar in that like northeast part of Nashatar, that cave zone. This looks so cool. And the contrast between these two just styles of design is so unique and really, really cool. PTR drops tomorrow. I'm excited to get into it and see where it goes. But they go on even further, showing more parts of the actual zone. I would assume deeper onto the caves. Hardcore Zangar Marsh references here. And when you get into the actual Obsidian Citadel, Aberrus parts of the post here, there's Drogbar as well, which is very, very cool. Snail racing is actually a thing. The raid screenshots look incredible. I love the blue and red contrast here. It looks just incredible. This is one of the coolest screenshots I've ever seen in my life from this game. This looks so good. This raid looks insane, like thematically. I love the sort of gothic-esque kind of theme with the Blackwing Descent, Blackwing Lair underlying vibes as well. 9 bosses again are a part of the raid. We'll see where this goes testing-wise, but initial like art and I guess screenshots, concept art looks very, very cool. We have a good boy in the raid, a doggo, which is sick, and it just looks insane. Now, to a similar extent, right here, Blizzard also did indeed release tier sets today, which, depending what class you are, you might have got the short end of the stick or, the longest stick out there. Starting at the top here, Hunter, Monk, Demon Hunter, and Evoker. They're all fine. I probably prefer Monk the most here. They're all fine-ish. Looks like relatively generic tier sets with a bit of a underlying class theme. Hunters have that one shoulder aspect to their tier again. Moving on, we have Druid, Warrior, and Shaman. I have to say, Druid probably got the coolest looking tier set I've seen in a long time. I feel like the level of detail on this set is like just 3 times as in depth as every other set. Like the detail on the leaves, like the autumn-esque coloration to it, it looks actually insane. And this helm sort of looks warlocky too. I'm a little jealous, but we have once again Druid, Warrior, and then Shaman. This is heroic warrior tier as well. Moving on, we have Mage, Rogue, Mythic tier, and Warlock being the elite PvP set. Now, Mage looks a bit to me, it's fine. Rogue looks roguish. Warlock looks warlock-ish. I don't love the pink here, but this is also the elite PvP set. There will be, I'd assume, an LFR, normal, heroic, and mythic skin as well. I think a red or like green, orangish yellow offset would look really good in this too. So we'll see where it goes. The belt looks sick. The helm looks okay with horns on it. The gloves, I'm not a huge fan of. But either way, tier is tier. I just noticed he has no fingers on him. That's interesting. But either way, I think it looks pretty good. I'll still wear tier 3. But and then finally we have Death Knight, Priest, and Paladin. Now, personally, I love the Scarlet Crusade kind of vibes that Paladin has here. I wish this gold was more this color gold. DK looks cool too. It'll look insane in a dark red color. Let's be honest. Priest and Druid got the best sets hands down, and it's not even close. This set looks like Diablo-esque. This set looks insane. Priest looks insane. Druid looks insane. Paladin can maybe use a little bit of help here and there. But yeah, tier is indeed back in S2, if you were curious about it. Paladin, Druid look insane. Everyone else looks okay. So when it comes to the 4 new dungeons entering the Mythic Plus cycle for, I guess, the next season or so, Vortex Pinnacle, Neltharian's Lair, Freehold, and Underrot. These are the first time we've seen Battle for Azeroth dungeons being introduced into the M+ pool since, well, Battle for Azeroth. And both Freehold and Underrot are probably some of the most iconic dungeons from BFA. Freehold being interesting because it wasn't incredibly demanding mechanically, but there are pathing choices you could make. It was iconic. You could make these big pulls. Everybody loved Freehold. Underrot reminds me a lot of Court of Stars in the current season, where if you could handle the mechanics that Underrot threw at you quickly and efficiently without messing up, it was a very free dungeon. But it was very hard, or very easy to make mistakes in Underrot, and very hard to recover depending on how big the mistake you made was. So an interesting choice to bring back, but I'm down for it. It was a cool dungeon. Neltharian's Lair, iconic, ties into the actual patch very well, being Black Dragonflight, all of that. A good dungeon. We'll see how the Drogbar and Pelters are tuned, because those were very, very problematic a long time ago when it was Legion era. And you could also kite in Neltharian's Lair very well back in the day with Warlock slow rings. You can't do that anymore. But the biggest dungeon, I guess the hot topic here is Vortex Pinnacle. This is a Cataclysm dungeon. We have not seen any dungeons at all from Cataclysm ever, as far as M+ is concerned, with them cycling in new dungeons starting in, I believe, S3 of Shadowlands, right? Now, from my own perspective, I was talking about it a bit on stream. I feel like Legion is when dungeons started to become designed a lot more with M+ in mind, really shifting towards Battle for Azeroth, Shadowlands, and now Dragonflight. But I feel like there was a shift in what dungeons were coming out of BC and Wrath and the Cata, and then a bit of a shift again towards the easier end of the spectrum going into MoP. Cata dungeons were known, like on launch, to be very demanding, very interestingly tuned, being a bit overtuned, and just a bit of a grind. But looking back at what Cata has, Blackrock Caverns, Dead Mines, Hour of Twilight, Throne of the Tides, Vortex Pinnacle, obviously, Stonecore, Shadowfang Keep, Grim Batal. There's a lot of spicy choices in here, and them going back this far to Cataclysm opens up the possibilities even more for dungeons in Season 3, because we don't know what's happening in S3. We're going to have all 8 Dragonflight dungeons being complete, essentially, and you're going to have, I would assume, at least 4 new ones, plus the Mega Dungeon hitting in 10.1.5. Seeing them go back to Cataclysm is surprising, albeit there is some ties to Vortex Pinnacle and Dragonflight, Dragons, all that, but very cool to see. It was a relatively demanding dungeon, I'm pretty sure, back in the day. Things hit really hard. It reminds me also a bit of, like, Underrot in a sense, but it's also been a long time, and let's be honest, we probably weren't the best back then. But very cool to see. On top of that, we also have the other 4 dungeons returning, or I guess returning in a sense. Halls of Infusion, Brackenhide Hollow, Oldemon, and Notharius. Blizzard did indeed mention in an interview that they are aware of the difficulty that currently exists in Mythic Zeros for Brackenhide Hollow, Halls of Infusion, and probably to a similar extent Oldemon and Notharius if need be. And they are going to maybe look to make changes if possible during PTR. I will say that both Ruby Life Pools, and I believe it's hard to remember back that far. Ruby Life Pools and Azure Vault were pretty different in their initial forms on beta as well, and they made substantial changes to them over the course of beta before they went live and became part of the M+ cycle. So we'll see where that goes, but out of all the possibilities for returning dungeons, I did not expect Vortex Pinnacle or Freehold or Underrot. Neltharian's Lair makes some sense, but very cool to see. I'm pumped for it, and yeah, we'll see where it goes. Now, one thing that might affect those new dungeons, though, is Blizzard went on to also clarify that there's no seasonal affix in Dragonflight Season 2, and the level 7 affix bucket is getting a affix refresh. Now, when they use the word bucket in the actual interview here, I was curious what that meant. The level 7 affix bucket consists of Quaking, Grievous, Volcanic, Storming, and Explosive, which, to be fair, are some of the more problematic affixes out there. Probably make a case for most of them being problematic, but they go on to say here that they're going to take a closer look at them and look to see how much counterplay there is to these affixes and make changes if need be. It's good to see them actually looking at affixes because it's been a pretty big discussion point in the past few weeks, month and a half, as far as community feedback's been. I will say that when it comes to removing the seasonal affix, I'm a bit split on it because I think Thundering has certainly not helped the community's general dislike of affixes. Now, a lot of that is just based around affixes being a bit stale. Once again, Quaking, Volcanic, Explosive, Storming, and Grievous being a bit more recent, but still just being punishing affixes don't make dungeons fun in the first place, especially looking at how difficultly tuned at times Dragonflight dungeons are. I feel like Thundering didn't help that. And looking back at previous affixes, whether it's, Awakened or Encrypted or even like Prideful back in the day, all those affixes had influence on how you pull the dungeon, pathing in a sense. Like Prideful, for example, you wanted to proc Prideful at the right point in the dungeon, so where you weren't like pulling too much, you had the buff to carry into the next pack for a big damage increase. Encrypted gave you skips or bonus damage in certain points of the dungeon you wanted. And what was it called? Awakened. It changed pathing across the board in every dungeon. You could skip certain parts of it. You could choose to just say, hey, I want to leave this obelisk up so we can fight certain other mobs at the final boss and just, double down on, shaving some time off the key. Those were all affixes that changed the dungeon, changed pathing, and changed how it felt. Now, Blizzard did indicate in here that with dungeons rotating often, they don't feel they really need a seasonal affix to keep things fresh. And I do think that's true to a certain extent. I get where they're coming from that. And I'm definitely not against trying this out, but I think in the case of Thundering, even they're citing Infested here. Even when it comes to Infested, that still changed how you approach the dungeon to a certain extent, right? Now, albeit it wasn't a great way to approach the dungeon because Infested sort of sucked, but Thundering really doesn't do that. Thundering, you can't trigger Thundering like Prideful. It just sort of swells and procs, and when you get the effect, you have it for a few seconds and you clear it. But realistically, the damage increase on Thundering really doesn't do a whole lot. Mobs were buffed to sort of compensate for Thundering's buff in the first place. And 9 times out of 10, you just end up clearing it early anyways and sort of ignoring the effect, right? Now, if you look at how Awakened or Encrypted or Prideful or even Infested or Beguiling, Reaping, all these affixes, right? Basically every seasonal affix except for Thundering, how they affect the dungeons. Let's say you take X dungeon. Let's say Halls of Valor, for example. If you put every single seasonal affix in that dungeon that we've had, including Thundering, basically every affix that's out there, Awakened, Encrypted, Reaping, whatever, what have you, Beguiling, they all change the way you approach the dungeon. Whether you're skipping mobs, shrouding past things, proccing Prideful at certain points, Thundering doesn't do that. Thundering is literally, it procs on a boss sometimes, on trash at times. Sometimes you're AFK running to another pack. You just clear it and move on with life, right? And it's more of a nuisance than anything because Thundering just ended up being a, oh, sick, we didn't clear this, we got stunned now kind of effect, right? So I'm curious to see where it goes. I do agree that they likely aren't needed to keep things fresh because there are new dungeons rotating in, but I sort of enjoyed them. I like the Kiss Curse kind of rewards that Prideful had, Awakened had, I guess Encrypted to a certain extent had, but Thundering really didn't have that. You had the Kiss Curse of maintaining the buff for longer to get a bigger damage increase, but realistically, it just felt so minuscule in the first place. It wasn't Encrypted at all. It wasn't Prideful at all. It just felt like this is a headache. Just clear it out and move on with life. If it does mean, though, that they can take time away from looking at, seasonal affixes and just tuning current ones, like Volcanic, like Grievous, like Storming, whatever, or making dungeons better as a whole, it's certainly the right move than spending 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks, a month or two on these seasonal affix just to hear that it's subpar at the end of PTR and just having to tune it a million times, like what happened Thundering. So we'll see where this goes. I am willing to see what happens, and likely chances are pretty high it ends up being a pretty good move overall. The more I think about it, the more I'm sort of a fan of it, but I am going to miss the reaping, the encrypted affixes. I think that's the bigger issue with me, is those were really fun affixes. So potentially, depending on how the level 7 affix bucket shakes out, hopefully they keep those encrypted, those reaping, those awakened affixes in mind, and maybe can build around them to a certain extent. Now, another hot topic is that Blizzard mentioned, so for Dragonflight Season 2, Aberrus, the Shadow Crucible, every difficulty, normal, heroic, mythic, will indeed all be opening again at one time, just how Vault of the Incarnates in Season 1 did. Now, this received a lot of mixed feedback, mostly like being negative from, I would probably say, a higher player's perspective or POV. Now, from my own perspective, I don't raid in Liquid or Echo or Method or BDGG. I rate my guilds, I think, World 99. We get Hall of Fame. We killed Razziath like a month and a half ago, roughly. When it came to my own experience last year, I greatly preferred having Heroic Week and then Mythic Week, because when it all drops at once, it feels like any minute you spend not in Mythic, like in Heroic doing splits or doing clears, or in Normal, is like you're wasting time, because you can be in Mythic putting in more time, grinding things out, which can mean rankings, which can mean Hall of Fame. And while that does affect only a small portion of the player base, it's just my opinion, it felt pretty awkward. It felt like there was this looming sort of Damocles over your head of any minute you're not in Mythic, you're wiping in Heroic on a hard boss is overtuned or whatever. It's a problem. You're losing time, right? Now, Blizzard cited one of the main reasons for this being because of Mythic Plus, and previously in older expansions, they've had to cap Mythic Plus eye level rewards at +7 difficulty, +8 difficulty, because of not having Mythic open at the same time. So you could run +7s, +8s, get max eye level gear for that week. You could push past +7 and 8. You could push to +20 if you wanted, but you would still get +7 eye level or +8 eye level. Now, it's sort of be like if the raid opened all at once week 1, but you could do Mythic, but only Heroic gear drop, is basically the equivalent of what they're saying for Mythic Plus, which does feel awkward, and I do agree they probably need to find a way to address that. Now, there's two things here. Number one, they could just straight up uncap Mythic Plus week 1 and still do normal Heroic week and then Mythic. I don't think that would be that bad, because realistically, they could sort of tune the raid around it to a certain extent on Mythic. Tuning happens on PTR at a higher eye level in the first place. Tuning is the focal point of this debate, because if you look at how Vault of the Incarnates went, there were a handful of bosses that whatever guild reached first, whether it was a phase or the boss in general, had to be nerfed. And it ended up being all right, we hit a wall, go farm Mythic Plus and wait for the nerfs. We hit a wall, go farm Plus, get more nerfs. Kill the boss. Next boss, wait for nerfs, go do Plus. When Liquid reached Razziath Intermission, that boss was tuned so grotesquely high, you needed gear from the next expansion to beat the Intermission. I'm not even kidding. It was so grotesquely overtuned that you needed gear from like 10.2 to even have a chance of beating the Intermission. It was nerfed by like 70%, I'm pretty sure. 50, 60%. It was nerfed a crazy amount, which does sort of lead into the normal and Heroic week gives options for number 1, boss tuning, and number 2, class tuning, because there were some outliers heading into season or Vault of the Incarnates, right? And tuning did happen the week of Mythic and the week after, right? So it puts an emphasis on Blizzard getting raid tuning down to a T and class tuning down to a T, which we'll see if that's the case. They did mention that the more casual player base, it appeals to them a bit more, having normal and Heroic open up. And this might sound elitist. I don't think it is. I'm not trying to be, but I don't think the casual player base is walking into Mythic week 1. Some might be for fun, but I don't think they actually are. My own personal standpoint, I enjoyed normal Heroic week separate from Mythic, because it gave me time to have fun with my guild, to go into Heroic, joke around a little bit, see bosses, kill them, and have a bit of free time to do whatever. And to a similar extent, when it all drops at once, any waking moment you're not raiding Mythic, you can be in plus farming gear. And if you're not doing that, whether you're sleeping or doing whatever, it feels like you could be doing more. And you're sort of letting your guild down in a higher end setting because you're coming in at a lower eye level comparatively to everybody else. So I think that while this is an interesting avenue to explore, it has its own set of problems. And like me personally, maybe there's a better solution in season 3. I'd much rather see a normal Heroic week and then Mythic after that. And if you have to cap Mythic Plus eye level for a week or so, it is what it is. But I do think that needs to be the focal point of finding a solution, because it's not fair to M+ers and things at all, having their loot capped for a week. But at the same time, you know, there's a damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of scenario. I don't know the answer, but I can say from my own personal standpoint, having every difficulty opening at once is not as exciting as having Heroic Week into Mythic Week. Now, on top of all that, the one final thing here, outside of loot, that Blizzard talked about was the Revival Catalyst in patch 10.1, which is the OG creation catalyst, which is very interesting here. So, in an interview, they asked, can you tell us anything about the Revival Catalyst in 10.1? And Morgan Day responded, it will still be there, although we have a lot of conversations around player expectations around their set bonuses, meaning tier. He goes on to say that back in the day in Legion, when you had these sets, they were looked at as more aspirational. When you would attain them, it was cool. But nowadays, it's more like you push towards them. Like you're missing a piece of your character until you get that 2 set or that 4 set. There's much more emphasis on grinding out tier quickly. And while the Catalyst does help fill that need, that hole, he doesn't say that it's coming out earlier. But they did say they're making changes, not exactly around the Catalyst, but we definitely have discussed ways we can add more determinism and more bad luck protection to people's acquisition of their tier bonuses. Now, he doesn't say what exactly. He mentions a blog post coming out in a few days, which I believe is being written by Skarzard, which I'm excited to read. I am hoping there's been 2 hot topic points when it comes to like gear acquisition during the Race to the World first, during just random conversations in chat. Number 1 is coins returning, which is RNG, but at the same time, it's still an extra chance at loot. Having coins returning, being able to coin a boss that has tier on it or has a good trinket on it, that could be very helpful. And number 2, which sort of plays, I guess, 2 and or 3 here, is number 1, a dinar system, which was very good in S4, which also helps with rare items, because they mentioned they are indeed having more rare items in Season 2 from raiding, like Whispering Incarnate Icon, the rings from Diurna and Aranog. Those rare items will be around again. Dinars help a crazy amount there. And when it comes to tier, one thing it's missing for a long time is actually just a universal token from the end boss. Going back to, I think it was Blackhand and Blackrock Foundry, having that 6th token on the end boss, you could trade for a helm, a pair of shoulders, a chest, gloves, or legs was huge, and it helped so many players fill out their tier sets by getting that one universal token. So, like, while the Catalyst starting up earlier, I think still is a great thing to have, and hopefully they do sort of find the middle ground there in this patch. Coins, dinar system, or extra tier token also helps extremely. Helps an insane amount, and even outside the Race to World first setting. So hopefully it's a mix of that. Hopefully we'll hear more in the blog post soon. But I'm definitely excited for that and to hear what they have in store for us. And the last thing here, which is actually very cool, at least to me, I think it's pretty interesting progression-wise. Valor is essentially going away in patch 10.1. There is going to be a new system which is based around flight stones and crests, which this is a long drawn out post from Blizzard that WoW had summarized here. I'll have links to it all down below, obviously. Flagstones and crests. Crests come in 4 different varieties: whelplings, drakes, worms, and aspects, each corresponding to an increasing level of difficult content. Now you can acquire these through various ways of Mythic Plus, I believe world content, just doing activities in general in the game and all that, right? Now, there's a massive discount in the upgrade cost on items if any character on your account has a higher item level in that slot. So this is actually a really big change. This is sort of like Blizzard making it very easy to gear your alts through your main in a sense, because if your main, for example, has a higher bow, or I guess a higher pair of gloves than your alts, it becomes essentially half the price of flagstones needed to upgrade those gloves or XYZ on your alts. Because currently with condensed promo focus and things in patch 10.0, there really isn't any way to help your main gear your alts up, barring sending promo chaos across to them. So there is indeed that. Very cool to see. There's a weekly cap on the number of crests you can obtain each week, 10 of each kind, so 10 whelpling, 10 drake, 10 worm, and 10 aspects. The cap also increases over time and allows you to catch up freely if you don't reach it within a week. So sort of like artifact knowledge, kind of. You can catch up if you didn't get all 10 crests. It's very cool. Seems like a well thought out system. Now, one of the big questions, will Keystone Master and Hero still be around? They indeed will be, but they are not tied to M+ upgrades. Valor is gone. There's no more Valor anymore. There's no needing 2400 to upgrade max Valor upgrades on a certain item. It is changed. Now, this is relatively confusing, sort of in depth here. I would encourage you to read through the post as well, but I can try and explain it relatively decently here. So they've broken it down into basically explorer, adventurer, veteran, champion, and hero. I guess, I don't know what you want to call it, tags on the gear. Instead of saying Mythic 15, Mythic 20, whatever, it's going to say adventurer, veteran, champion, hero, and it will have the rank next to it. Now, this indicates, so let's say, for example, you're running a key and you get a 408 item to drop, right? It is a veteran 3 out of 8 ranking. Items created at this level will always have upgraded level. So if it drops at 408, it'll be tagged veteran 3 out of 8. Now, unlike current Valor, the veteran items can only be taken to the max veteran rank. So for example, 4 out of 8 veteran is 411. But if you look over here, items upgraded to this level might also be, and this caps out at 8 out of 8 veteran, being 424. So let's say, for example, a Furious Rage Feather drops at 402 Mythic Plus. This is not going to happen this season, but just for example's sake. 402 Mythic Plus, you can push that Furious Rage Feather from veteran 1 out of 8 to veteran 8 out of 8. But you cannot push that feather to any rank of hero or any rank of champion 5 through 8 and all of that. So basically what this is doing is that it's removing the Valor restrictions, essentially making it easier to upgrade gear because you don't need to hit 2400, 2500, whatever it could be. But you cannot run Mythic 0, for example, for that Bish Trinket and upgrade it all the way to max level. You can't run and get a 382 item or 376 and pump it all the way up to 441, hero 5 out of 5. You have to run higher content. It encouraged you to run higher content to try and get items. So essentially, if you're looking to get the highest overall item, basically 415 in current game as far as like max Valor upgrades go, you want to be running whatever gives you essentially hero gear, because champion gear once again caps out at a max of 437, but hero gear at rank 5 out of 5 will cap out at 431. So let's say, for example, hero gear is equivalent of, this is the equivalent of a, basically hero is probably plus 20 or plus 15 gear, right? And champions probably like plus 12, 13, 14, whatever. You're going to want to be running plus 15s or higher to get the max eye level rewards. If you run a plus 12, plus 13, plus 14, for example, and it gives you a champion piece, that champion piece can be pushed from anywhere from 415 to 424 all the way up to 437. But it cannot be pushed to 441 because that's only a hero specific item level. So like I said, running plus 2s, plus 3s, plus 7s, plus 10s to farm that max level Rage Feather, that max level XYZ, you can't really do that anymore because you're going to be capped out on the limits of whatever veteran is, which is 424, whatever champion is, which is 437, and you won't be able to reach the max hero upgrade. So I guess on the bright side, it's sort of easier to upgrade. You can get Crest through Mythic Plus. You can get it, I believe, from World events. You can also get it through raiding, which is very cool because it makes raiding essentially a way to upgrade gear, which wasn't really a thing in the past. You didn't get Valor from raiding. All you got was, Primal Focuses and things, right? But it makes raiding relevant from a upgrade perspective, as well as Mythic Plus, as well as World events and stuff by acquiring more Crest. But on the downside, if you're farming max level gear or trying to get max level gear, you have to run, well, higher content. So the big question on everyone's mind is, when is patch 10.1 likely to hit? Because we know Diablo is releasing on June 6th, and there's going to be a handful of bosses to test in the raid, Mythic Plus dungeons, tier sets, class tuning, all the above. Now, there are 9 bosses in the raid, Blizzard's already clarified on that, and they typically don't test end bosses. So let's say they're going to test 8 bosses in the raid, 8 on Heroic, 8 on Mythic, 16 bosses being tested. PTR drops today. It is 3 in the morning my time. It is the 9th. It's dropping later on today. So let's say that it drops here. Next week is starting here, basically on reset day being Tuesday. Let's say that we don't test this week, obviously. Let's say we don't even test next week. Testing begins, let's say theoretically, on the 21st this week. So let's say they test on Wednesday and Thursday, or Thursday and Friday. They typically test roughly 2 bosses per day if they're not rushing. So let's say 4 bosses per week, which is, about average. So let's say they go 2 bosses, 4 bosses, 6, 8, 10, 12. We're in April here in the 6th. And then 14, 16. This puts us in mid-April for testing to be concluded if they go at a normal-ish pacing kind of schedule, right? Now, sometimes bosses need to be retested. Sometimes testing is canceled. But we've already given a pad week here. If you give 2 pad weeks, you can push it back another week or so. It still ends like April 19th, 20th, 21st, which gives a good bit of time for plus testing, which happens, I'd assume, simultaneously as raid testing. class testing, tier sets, tuning, all that. I could see this patch still easily hitting early to mid-April. Because, like I said, 2 pad weeks worth of testing here puts you with raid testing ending on the 20th, 21st. Even if you go 3 weeks, it's ending here, which gives a week, 2 weeks of pad before the patch comes out. And we know, once again, all difficulties of the raid are releasing simultaneously. So let's say the patch hits even on the 9th. You've got a week of prep. The raid drops here. Mythic drops plus opens up here on the 16th. You've got a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, basically 3 to 4 weeks before Diablo releases, which Blizzard has mentioned they're keeping in mind. I think this patch very easily, safely still hits in May, early May, mid-May, possibly late May, but regardless, we'll see where it goes. I don't believe the June or July dates are very realistic. This patch, I'm assuming, looking at how fast alpha and beta were, hopefully it's pretty fast as well, development-wise, but at the same time, hopefully it's tuned properly, because once again, every difficulty opening at once, class tuning and raid tuning, boss testing certainly is going to be a point of debate. So with that being said, hope the video answered the question you guys might have had about this. Hopefully it wasn't too long. I'm pumped. PTR starting tomorrow. I'll be streaming it. Come by if you want to check it out. And yeah, thanks for watching, guys. I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.